So, today I want to talk about the intermediate guitar slump, or, guitar stagnation. It's kind of this thing that I've noticed that happens a lot. Thank you, chat. This thing that happens a lot with intermediate guitar players where you kind of get to this point where you're like, well, I've learned a lot of songs and I feel like I can play some scales, and I'm almost kind of getting bored with guitar because I can kind of learn the songs I want to learn, but also, is guitar just about learning songs? And I guess another way to put this is at the beginning, when you're a beginning guitarist, the path forward seems pretty straightforward. It's like learn some chords, learn some strumming patterns, learn some basic songs, and then slowly start getting to learn more difficult songs. On the same wavelength, it's kind of hard to stay motivated sometimes. Does anyone in the chat relate with this so far, by the way? It's hard to be motivated sometimes where you're like, well, I've learned these 10 songs. I guess I'm going to learn another 5 songs, another 10 songs. What do I do? And you might even hit a wall where you go, yeah, I know I could learn, the solo from that song. That might be a challenge, but it doesn't necessarily sound like a fun thing to do for me. Like, I know I could do it, but I don't know if that sounds very fun. And, yeah, okay, I'm getting a lot of agreement in the chat right now. Good. So there's almost this guitar culture thing going around. I mean, I think it's a thing with all musicians where you look at your favorite artists and it feels like they have like a special something, a special talent that you just don't have, and that they're achieving something that you're not there yet. And this basically, what I'm describing is the intermediate guitar slump. It's arriving at this point where you kind of go, I'm not excited anymore. I'm not having as much fun. I feel like I'm capable of playing guitar, but like something's missing. And so, in my opinion, what's missing and why is writing music. Now, before you click away and go, ooh, I'm not a songwriter, I don't want to go to open mics, I'm not talking about writing a whole song. I'm talking about being creative, making stuff up. When you think about like a visual artist, for example, there are people who do oil paintings that are like exact replica of a picture. But there are also people who will do quick sketches on a napkin, or there are people who will take different kinds of media and sort of, come up with something interesting to do. And the main difference that I see between an intermediate guitar player and, in some cases, even a professional musician is not that you have more or less skill. It's that you maybe aren't giving yourself permission to explore making your own music. And, oh man. And when I say you're not giving yourself permission, it's often because people feel like those talented people have a special thing that you don't have. And I've seen so many people sit down to try to write something, and because it doesn't go well the very first time they try to write something, they go, okay, I'm not a creative person. When that's not how creativity works. That's not how writing music works. The way it works is the same way that you learned those chords and you learned those scales and you practiced different fingering and different picking patterns and stuff. It's the same thing. You just have to sit down and try things out. The other tricky thing about this is a lot of the early beginner guitar stuff. Thunder says, seeing everyone shred when you just learned tapping. Yeah, I mean, that's a technique that takes a lot of practice. But when it comes to just making up stuff, a lot of the early beginning stuff feels like you're kind of taking a class where it's like, here's the starting point you're at right now, here's the knowledge you're missing, and then by the end, you should be able to do X, Y, and Z. And a lot of people think songwriting is like a similar progression, or just getting better at being creative on guitar is a similar progression where you go, okay, here's the skills I don't have, and then here are the concrete set of skills I have now. When I think a more accurate sort of example would be if you were like an explorer in the 16, 17, 1800s, you might develop your skill for sailing, or your skill for, I don't know, tying knots or navigating streams or something. And then you arrive having those skills, and then you've got to figure it out from there. A lot of songwriting is a lot more like that, where there isn't some secret sauce that someone's hiding from you. It's just that they've developed their own language for their own set of skills. So, wow, Dogzilla Monster says, I have never gotten into trying to play songs. I just do solos to backing tracks. That's cool too. I mean, I'm a big fan of guitar students finding the thing they like, the thing that's inspiring, and doing that. But so today, I guess what I wanted to do, and I might keep this one short, we'll see, it depends on how it goes. But what I wanted to do was give you a thought, and that is to say, this lack of motivation thing that often happens in the intermediate guitar slump is often because you're looking for external motivation, this new song, this new technique, this new thing, where songwriting, or even just writing music, doesn't have to be a song, that can often be intrinsically motivating, where there's just like, there's somehow just sitting down to do it actually increases the motivation. And the deeper you get into something, the more you feel like, oh, I can hear something that I want to do, and it's like barely within my reach, but it's going to take me a few minutes to figure out what that thing is. This is intrinsic motivation. This is where you are learning how to fish by yourself, and you don't need someone to catch fish for you. You know what I'm saying? So I guess where I want to go from here is to say just a very basic concept. Basic music theory can take a couple weeks to learn, but it can take you a lifetime to explore. And that exploration to me is the most fun, the most exciting, the most interesting thing about writing music, and about being a musician in general. Because, and we'll get into this in a minute, but when you start writing music for yourself, you start, True S Armor says, give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish, and I want to teach you to fish. So when you start writing music yourself, it's not just that you learn how to write music. It's also you're learning how to play music with other people even better, especially if you learn recording software, because then you can do layers and layers and see like, oh, if someone's playing this and this and this, it doesn't feel like there's very much room for me to play something else I wanted to play. And being able to play with other people is such a fun, rewarding part of being a musician. So let's just get into it. Let's do it. So the basics of music theory. And also, I just want to check a few things here before I get into it a little too heavily here. Good. We got a good number of viewers showing up. Thanks for being here. I know this was last minute. I didn't like plan it or anything, but that's kind of how I like to roll. A little off the cuff here. So, as I'm working through this lesson, we're gonna dive into maybe some, some basic stuff you can do with just a guitar in your hand. We might also dive into some recording software stuff. We also might dive into who knows. But in the meantime, if you have a question about anything, feel free to fire it off in the chat. I believe that you can do a little at Scott Paul Johnson, and I should be able to see your question pretty easily. I don't even know. I think I have super chats on here or something if you feel like asking a question with a couple bucks attached, but I don't really care. Whatever you feel like. What a perfect question to ask before I dive into this. So Lead by Example 108 says, given that music theory is complete, for lack of a better word, what makes it so hard to learn? Well, think of it like this. If you learn English and you feel like you can fully communicate the thoughts in your head, does that automatically mean that you're a poet? No. You got to work at poetry just as much. Like, learning English doesn't automatically mean you're a poet. music is the language, and maybe music theory is the way we talk about the language so we can think about it more clearly and more abstractly. But then actually putting it together in interesting and fun ways is what takes all the practice and a lifetime of fun, in my opinion. So I'm gonna pop over to my iPad here, and let me think about this. I think what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna go over to my camera guitar, and I'll bring my iPad with me over here. So, oh, is it just me or is this mic a little bit louder? If it is, I can turn it down, or I can just talk a little quietly. So let's go with the easiest key in the world. And let me unmute this guitar while I'm at it. And I might turn this microphone down just a little bit. There we go. Okay. So, oh, it sounds the same? Good. So we've got a C here. And the key of C, as with all major keys, starts with a root note. And then we go whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That's a major scale. So we start on a root note, then we move a whole step, half step, or excuse me, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, and then we're back to a half step. So guitar, you can do this on one string. But then the cool thing about guitar is this note is right here on the guitar. So basic music theory says, here's a major scale. Okay, what do we do with it? And I think this is the right button. Okay, I don't know what that extra thing is in there, but we'll see. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And we've got, oh, that's interesting. I see what happened here. My iPad didn't flip when I moved it over here. Here we go. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And there are whole steps and half steps between the right notes here. This is what makes every major scale a major scale, is the whole steps and half steps. So now that we got a major scale, what the heck do we do with it? Well, we can make chords. And this is the coolest thing about any major key. If you start on the first note of the scale and you skip a note, now we've got C and E. And anytime you travel the distance of two whole steps, and you play those two notes together, it's called a major third. When we travel a half step and a whole step, that is called a minor third. And when you put a major third first and a minor third second, you get a major chord, a major triad. And when you just find as many places to play that as possible, you get a nice full guitar chord. And I'll say this again, this is live, so if anyone has any questions about this, go for it. Right? So that's a C major chord. Major chord always starts with a major third, ends with a minor third. And it just so happens if we go to the fourth note of the scale and we play every other note, we get another major third and minor third, which gives us an F major chord. So in the key of C, what it means to be in a key is that we're just using the notes of a scale. So we're in the key of C, that means we're only using a C major scale to create chords and melodies and stuff, which we'll get to the melodies in a minute. But we've got a C major chord, we've got an F major chord because major third, minor third. And then we've got a G major chord because again, if we just play every other note starting on G, we've got major third, minor third. And because these chords start on the first, let me do that, there we go. First, the fourth, and the fifth note of the scale, we call that the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. And so if you've ever heard the term 1-4-5 progression, like that's what it means. It means the chord based on the first note of the scale, chord based on fourth note of the scale, and the chord based on the fifth note of the scale. Pretty cool. So if those are 3 notes of the scale that we've based a chord on. there are other notes of the scale where if we start on the second note of the scale and we play every other note, so D, F, and A, well, any chord that starts on a minor third and ends on a major third, it's called a minor chord. So this is a D minor chord that's slightly out of tune. Can I fix that by bending it a little? There we go. That's better. So this is 2, and if we start on the third note of the scale, now we've got an E minor chord because minor third, major third, and then if we go over to the 6th note of the scale, sorry for about that G. So here's A, C, and E. That's an A minor chord. So the last note of the scale, B, if we play every other note, we get something called a diminished triad, which is kind of probably the most gnarly sounding and one of the rarest triads. Usually you see them as 7th chords, which is a whole other thing. But what we end up with is this set of chords that goes major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, and then we're back to major. And this set of chords, let me go to my iPad here. This set of chords, C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B, diminished. These are all the chords in the key of C. Sorry, had the wrong camera there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are all the chords in the key of C. So the cool thing is you can reverse engineer this. You can start by just memorizing the chords in a key, and then you don't have to remember how to make them. I think it's really useful to know how to make them, and I should probably mention my online school that I've been working on very hard for the past 4 years or so. I've got hundreds of lessons on there. I do a weekly live Q&A for any questions you have about any topic, always featuring the camera guitar when needed. And a lot of people tend to like it. And if you are an intermediate guitarist, it's really a school for intermediate players to learn a little bit of music theory and then learn how do I use it? What do I do with it? How do I become an actual musician? Stuff like that. I think you're gonna like it. So once we get to this point with our set of chords, then we got to figure out, okay, what do we do with it? And this is the cool thing, is learning to write music. And I can't emphasize this enough. I said it earlier, but learning to write music is not about sitting down to write a whole song. That's just, you can, but it's going to be frustrating. You're probably not going to love the final result. The better way to think about this is the same way that you practice putting your fingers down to play a chord in the beginning, right? This is how you start really getting the hang of particular chords. Straighten your fingers out, put them back on. If you want to think about that as just repetition to get your fingers used to doing things, writing music is the same way. You just practice doing some rapid fire stuff. This is not your magnum opus. This is not saying everything about who you are in a song. It's just making some crap. And sometimes it's crap, and that's normal. So what I want to do here is I want to set up a little grid. And this grid just represents whatever beats you want. It just has to be consistent. So it could be, this is just 2 beats, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It could be there's 3 beats per measure. I tend to like to think of this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, repeating. But the grid is just there for you to plug some chords in and see what happens. So we're gonna do this sort of Bob Ross style. We're just gonna plug in some chords, see how they feel. Low pressure, can't really make any mistakes. Just try it out. And if you're at home and you have these chords, try something out. If you got a guitar in your hands right now, play around with these chords the way that I'm about to show you, and then maybe let me know in the chat if you came up with a progression you like. Maybe I'll even play it if it looks interesting to me. So I'm gonna start with a C. You don't have to, but I'm gonna start with a C. Then I'm gonna go, I don't know. I'll try F, I'll try E minor, and I'll try D minor. So I'm kind of doing this thing where I jump up to F and then I kind of just bounce back down to C. And let's see how this sounds. I could do a pattern, or for now, I'm just gonna do 2 strums each and just see how it sounds. Kind of nice. I like that. I don't love it, but I like it. The other cool thing is you don't have to start with C, and for reasons that are maybe too complicated to get into right now, you could kind of start on any chord and it may not necessarily feel like the key of C, but it might sound cool too. Let's see how this sounds. I'm gonna try something like 1, 2, 3, 4. I kind of like that. That's really nice. D minor, F, G, A minor. That's kind of cool. So I'm going to keep that one. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to write a complementary chord progression. And maybe what I'll do, basically, it's just a chord progression that kind of goes with. And the way it goes with is, well, you could do the same rhythm, or you could do something bigger, like, you know, or you could do something that's a little more relaxed, like, right, you know, that kind of thing. And I don't know what I want to do. Let's try C, D minor, C, E minor. Let's see how that sounds. That's kind of interesting. I'm gonna go to that second line. So, True S Armor says, this is not simple, is it? That's a great question. You know, I am using a bunch of different voicings that I know for these chords, but it's fairly simple to just think about, I know a D minor chord, I know an F chord, I know a G chord, I know an A minor chord. And the hardest part is just being decisive and just saying, I'm just gonna sit with these 4 chords for a minute. And then C, D minor, C, E minor. I don't know if that's too tricky. But maybe if you don't know those chords very well, or you don't have a good sense of how to write a strumming pattern. I've got lessons about writing strumming patterns on my Patreon as well. It's kind of fun. But this is just basic chords, and then I'm just making them slightly fancier. And this is honestly one of the coolest things about guitar, is using stuff like the caged system. If we start by just putting this chord progression down here, where we have a D minor, F, G, and A minor. And if you want to see that without the dots, this is just D minor, F, G, and A minor. Pretty straightforward. One of the coolest things about guitar, though, is anytime you play a chord like D minor, which is D, F, and A, you can always find a different voicing, which means a different place up the neck to play the same 3 notes. That's why this is also a D minor. This is a nice D minor. So this is a D minor because it's D, F, and A. Oh, I don't want to make anyone dizzy, but I'm going to go back down here for an F chord, which is F, A, and C. Very similar. This is D minor, this is F. And then our G chord looks like this, G, B, D, which we could play right down here, or we could play up here. And then that last chord is an A minor chord, which is just A, C, and E. So one of the coolest things about learning guitar and learning a system like the caged system is we could go up here and play that literally the same chords, but they sound a little cooler when you do something like D minor, right? Kind of cool. Suddenly that can make something more interesting. And part of the reason I talk about this voicing thing is sometimes when you write a chord progression and you feel like it's not interesting, the reason it's not interesting to you is almost never because of how the chords interact with each other. It's usually because they're not being played in an interesting way. It would be like saying, you know, if I were to give a speech and I just kept my voice at this exact same tempo and rhythm, and I didn't change. I didn't have any space in my words. I didn't emphasize any different letters or any different tones or anything, and you're just giving you pure information. Right? That wouldn't be a very interesting, inspiring speech, even if the content of the speech was interesting. You've got to take these chords and you got to make them feel special by maybe giving some space. And if you're, I mean, there's many ways to do this. And this is that thing I was talking about earlier with sort of writing music is a little bit more like an expedition than it is like taking a class. Like I have learned certain mantras of my own. Like what I just did was one of my own personal mantras is if you've got a chord progression and you want it to be a little more interesting, do something like low, high, low, high. So I just went high, or high, low, either way. High, low, high, low. And all of a sudden, that's the same 4 chords, but it sounds way more interesting to me than I'll do a different high-low. This is it's just kind of cool. So from here, I see a question from Thunder that says, how would you solo through the scale without sounding predictable, i.e. using the root, third, and fifth too much? So part of soloing without sounding too predictable is similar to the speech thing I was talking about earlier. If you're just focused on root, thirds, and fifths, that's the equivalent of kind of talking like this the whole time and being like, technically I'm getting all the information correct, but there's nothing interesting happening other than just getting the information correct. Music is not about getting information correct. It's about expression. And so much of expression is about ups and downs of your voice. If I'm talking down here, it's sort of depressing. And if I'm going, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. That's, you know, this is how music tells the story too. So there's a huge difference between going up and down a scale and giving maybe some appropriate space or pauses. So we'll do more of that later, because I think what I want to do is turn this into a track that I can play along with, maybe write a bass line, maybe do something fun. We'll see. But the idea is playing a solo, writing a melody is never just purely about the notes. It's also about the way those notes are played. You know, it reminds me of those phrases where when you emphasize a different word in the phrase, it has a different meaning. Like, I owe you money, or I owe you money, or I owe you money, or I owe you money. You see how that's all, yeah, inflection. Thank you, True S Armor. Different inflections make things sound so different, and music is the same way. It's not just about playing notes. Yeah. So, oh, we've got a question from Bon. I actually don't know how to pronounce the S with the thing hanging off the bottom, but I'm going to say Bons Sengun says, usually music is a combination of guitar, vocal, bass at minimum. Would they need to be the same notes as the guitar? So they're doing Bons, sorry, I'm sure that's not how to say it, but they're doing the same thing we're doing. Part of what it means to be in a key is the whole band has said, hey, we have chosen a C major scale to play all our chords, all our melodies, all our bass lines. And so when you pick a chord progression, what that means is on guitar, I'm going to be strumming a D minor chord. On bass, I'm going to be accenting notes in this D minor chord. When I'm singing, I am going to be singing between notes that sound good on a D minor and notes that are on the way to sounding good in D minor. So all of that stuff, all of the instruments are working together to convince the listener that everyone is on the same page about every chord. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. It'll be fun. So, coming over here, and I'm going to take that chord progression that I just wrote, and we're going to plop it into some recording software. Yeah, Brett, that is such a nice thing to say. Thank you. I love that. So I'm going to open my recording software, and while I do that, I'm going to get my MIDI controller. This thing, the cable's not long enough for me to hold it up correctly, but it's the Akai LPK25. Not sponsored, just really like this thing, LPK25. If Akai wants to sponsor me, that'd be sick, but not, you know, I just love this thing. And what this thing does is it just lets me input sounds into my computer. It has no built-in sounds. It just connects to what is called a software instrument. Let me push the right button here, show the right face. So right here, I have not selected an instrument yet. I'm gonna pick a drum kit. And now when I click buttons on my thing here, it gives me a drum beat. So let's see, I'm gonna find a drum that I like. Ooh. That snare is kind of freaky, but let's see. True S is asking if Logic Pro is free, and the answer is no, it costs money. It's like $200, but it is professional recording software that you can have the rest of your life. So I'm gonna make a beat. I don't know, I'm picking 100 BPM. Let's see how that sounds. Oh, and it's not going. That's a fine beat. I'm gonna turn this up while I'm recording here. So I'm gonna go. There you go, just like a nice classic drum beat. I'm hitting a cheat code where I made the timing perfect. I did not play the timing perfect, but now I've got, now I've got some pretty good timing here. So here's our beat. I'm gonna turn this down. And then I'm gonna do some stuff real quick just to make it so you can hear it really well on your end. Let's see. That's fine. That's a little much. There we go. And now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna plug in my guitar. I'm probably gonna do input 1 here. I don't know what input. We'll see. So, I'm gonna grab my cable. I am gonna plug into my guitar, which needs a little work as usual. And then I'm gonna plug into my audio interface over here. This is a kind of a cool, weird wall of gear over here, but it's basically, this is my little audio interface, and I am plugged into channel 1. So now I'm gonna go into my software, and I'm gonna make sure I'm on input 1. And that's the sound of just my raw guitar, but I'm gonna put a little amp effect on there. And put a little reverb. And now, let's get a little refresher here on what I'm looking for. D minor, F, G, A minor. So, there's a lot of ways to think about this. And part of what's so fun about writing music with recording software, which you don't have to do, but I have a pick in my pocket, I think. Come on. There we go. But a lot of people's instinct when they hear this beat and they want to play guitar to it would be to do something like this, which is totally okay. That's gonna be fine. So here is my recorded track. And that sounds pretty cool. So I like to imagine if I'm gonna create a little verse of some sort, which this feels like a verse. We'll keep it real simple for now, but that feels like some sort of a verse. Maybe that's the chorus. I don't really know. But what I want to do over here is I'm just going to create a slightly different section. And I'm not even going to bother changing the beat. I'm just going to change from hi-hats, which sound like this, to this is going to sound kind of terrifying, but I'm going to scoot this up to the ride, which is going to sound like this, just for a different vibe on the other section. And then the other chord progression we talked about was C, D minor, C, E minor. Let's just see what we can do there. And all I'm gonna do here is think about maybe giving it a little more space, maybe a lot more space. I'm gonna go, that sounds nice. See. Oh, I was thinking too hard. So there you have it, little B section. So this is, keeping it pretty simple. And now I've got this whole thing that I could play a solo over this. I could write a melody, I could play a bass line. There's a lot of things I could do. We'll call this guitar 2. And then maybe what I want to do is we'll get a little beefier tone on this. Maybe we'll just simply crank the gain turn a little reverb down. And let's just see how it sounds to noodle around with this a little bit. Yeah, I'm just kind of goofing around here, but I'll show you what I'm doing if you want to see. I guess why would I hide my guitar on a guitar channel? That'd be pretty weird. So I'll hit record here. Let's just see. Oh, the next section. This is our little thing. It's, you know, it's nothing too special right now, but it's kind of fun, you know? It's cute. And this is just like the fun of knowing a little bit of music theory and being able to tinker around with chord progressions. What I would probably do, let's see. True S Armor says, so you're starting your solo on the third versus the root. So this is a good time to talk about this. So check this out. What I love about this recording software is that I can hang out on one chord at a time. And so if I kind of just isolate, let's try to isolate just a D minor chord. Is this a D minor? So this is not going to be super exciting, but it will let us use the camera guitar to talk about soloing, because a few people are asking. Might as well get in there. It's kind of fun. So this is pretty cool. So if I go to my little guitar situation here, and we are in the key of C, but the most important thing here is that we are currently soloing over a D minor chord. So I'm going to put this in the sort of pentatonic scale area. And I'm a little out of tune. Hopefully it won't be too noticeably bad. So if we're soloing over just a D minor chord, well, all we're doing, if I'm in the key of C, and I play the notes that are not in this chord, that are in green right here, you'll hear that some of them sound fine, some of them sound kind of jarring. Check it out. And if I play just the blue notes, so if you think about a storyline, a story arc, you know, like a movie or a story you would tell someone. Stories where you're just being safe and you're just saying, this guy had a good day at work, he paid all his bills on time, he's got a loving family, and he's doing great. Nothing bad's ever happening to him. That's not a very exciting story. But if you say, well, his day started F, right? And then something weird happened, and he struggled through and it ended up okay. This is the whole gist of melody writing is these are the notes that sound the best to the chord, and then these other notes, some of them sound okay and some of them sound maybe bad and some of them sound weird. So if you're trying to find, oh yeah, so blue is the notes that are part of the chord. Green is the notes that are just in the key of C, and the blue notes are included in there. They're also in the key of C. The actual C itself is just letting you know that's the root note. So red is the root note, green is the scale, and blue is the actual chord that we're playing over. So a lot of writing a melody is about telling a story. If I start on a safe note and then I play a not so safe note, but I arrive at another safe note, that tells a little bit of a story. Right. And if I jump to another safe note from a safe note, it feels nice, like this. And as long as you're pausing on a note that feels safe, you're good to go. I want to emphasize, by the way, that this kind of stuff that I'm talking about is in my 5 levels of soloing lesson that I put out sometime last year, I think. Check that one out if you want more of this type of thing. But yeah, it's pretty great. So the trick here is if we're soloing over multiple chords, part of what's so tricky is my first chord here is a C chord, and then the next chord is D minor. So we've got right? So if I want to play a little melody, these are all different ways to sort of navigate this type of thing. True S Armor says, drop a link in the chat for your book, please. I don't have a book. I just have an online school. Patreon.com/ScottPaulJohnson. That is my online school. I'll drop a link in there if you want. But this kind of stuff that we're talking about right now is way heavier, way more intense there. Yeah, I did play a little blue note in there, Garrett. This stuff that I'm talking about right now is more intense than writing a chord progression and doing the kind of thing we're doing here. It's, yeah. So the C sharp that I just played will be explained by my 5 levels of soloing lesson. The gist of 5 levels of soloing is talking about how if you're starting with just the pentatonic scale, here's how you can solo. If you're starting with major or minor scale, here's how you can solo. If you're trying to focus on chord tones, here's how you can solo. If you want to add 7ths and 9ths into your solo, which is a part of a chord, it's kind of cool, here's how you do it. And then if you want to add those sharps and flats, here's how you can do it. It's pretty cool. But this kind of stuff is it's pretty heavy, it's pretty intense, and I don't want to lose anyone. Oh, the 5 levels is what you meant as a link. I mean, let's see. Give me a sec here. It's and let me make sure I don't blast anyone by playing my own video here. There we go. So, copy. Yeah, so if you want that link, there it is. That's my 5 levels of soloing lesson. It's a good one. So getting back into, the topic here. Did I miss any questions from anyone? I don't think I missed any questions from anyone. But, you know, if anyone has any questions for me. Oh, Jeff Seg says, I think I just lack a bit of creativity. But when you are creating a riff or a melody, do you hear it in your head first and then translate it to the physical guitar? Or how do you think of ideas? Jeff, that is a fantastic question and a very important one we should talk about. I would say, there are people who tend to more often have an idea in their head and then try to figure it out on guitar. And then there are people who just kind of explore and see what happens. And then there are people who deliberately practice doing both things. I am personally much more of a, you know, screw around and find out and see what happens. I rarely have a specific idea in my head, but when I do, I've practiced enough that I should be able to figure it out relatively easily. But you know, I'm glad you're asking this a question, because a lot of people just assume that it's normal to hear something in your head and to try to play it on guitar. But when you're writing melodies or something, which maybe is a great thing to just talk about here for a minute. When you're writing a melody, what's more common is to sort of stumble upon a phrase that you like and then figure out how to either repeat that phrase exactly or deliberately make changes to it so that you sort of create an expectation for someone. So if I wanna, let's say I'll come up with a little melody idea here so you can see what I'm talking about. So what do I wanna do? So that's a little phrase idea. I didn't know it was gonna sound that way. That could be a phrase. And if I wanted to pause and play that phrase identically or slightly different, it'll create a little sense of interest. And I have a video called How to Solo on Guitar Phrases. It's like part 1 phrases or part 2. I can't remember which part it is. But if I do something like this and I go, so I was kind of trying to find a good phrase there, but if my first phrase is, I can create a similar sounding phrases. And now all I tried to do is like basically copy the rhythm of that phrase, but starting on a different note, and it just kind of feels like it's supposed to go together. And this to me is a lot more about how melody writing works than even picking specific notes sometimes. So if we think of that first phrase as the A phrase, and then that would be the B phrase. If we do something like A, B, A, C, where the C phrase is then just something different compared to those two, it'll feel like music, even if you don't know how it's gonna sound, it's gonna feel very musical. Let me see if I can come up with a C phrase on the fly. So we go, back to A. C phrase. And now we have something that sounds like a song. I didn't know it was gonna sound that way. I didn't pre-hear it in my ear. I just trusted this system called ABAC that it would sound musical if I just did 2 similar phrases, A phrase, B phrase, then I did that exact same A phrase again, and then I did a different phrase. It tends to sound really musical. And I can show you what I mean by doing the same thing but in a totally different way. So let's try to, sorry, this is how I keep my finger stuck to my pick. For 20 years, I've been licking my finger. It's kind of weird, but I forget that people get confused by that. But I'll see if I can come up with another example on the fly. I want it to be a good example, so I'll try. So that'll be my A phrase, and then we'll just wing it from there. Let's see how that sounds. So, you see I started with this exact same phrase both times, I hope. And then my B phrase was trying to be similar. And then back to the A phrase. And then my C phrase. I don't know. I just wanted it to be a different phrase. But you can hear how it's almost like the arrangement of phrases makes things feel musical first. And then like the actual notes you pick also help, but maybe to a lesser degree or something. Guitar Love Around the World says, can I ask a question? Yeah, of course. Let me see. Guitar Love Around the World says, similar to Jeff's question, I am working on creating solos by starting on a given note and then start humming and keep going. It seems to work for me. Any thoughts on it? You start on a given note and then start humming and keep going. I mean, yeah, that sounds like a great way to do it. The analogy I was talking about earlier was learning basic music theory feels like kind of being in school and having a set sort of way that you like to, you get a grade basically, like how well do you know this material? But then from there, it's all about you exploring and figuring out ways that you want to interact with that information. And if that's a way that helps you come up with solos, then that's great. True S Armor says, how do you write musical ideas down if you don't know music notation? How do you transfer the idea? Well, I'm recording all my ideas as I go. I just record them. It's actually easier for me to record than it is for me to notate my ideas. Yeah, so there you go. There's that. True S Armor says, what's your color legend, please? Yeah, sorry for the confusion on this thing. Red is the root note, green is the scale, and then I was using blue for that D minor chord and pink for that C major chord. Yeah, but no, True S, it's a good question. There is this sort of thinking that notation is the music, but notation used to be a shorthand way, well, shorthand for some people, way to remember the music. But now that we have recording, it's just kind of easier to record stuff. Yeah. So I was thinking that I might take this idea and roll with it a little differently, re-record it in a way that that might be a little more fun, maybe with a bass line or something. But I could also call it a day. I feel like I've, we got some good info to people. And then we've got some good, Teen Spirit asked a question. What program do you use for recording? I use Logic Pro 10, I believe. Logic Pro X. Apple software. There's lots of softwares out there, though. If you are more of a PC user, there's Reaper, which is a good, cheaper one. I think there's FL Studios, which is a good one. My dad's in the chat. Hi, Dad. There's also some kind of fancier stuff out there too, but Logic is my favorite software. Cool. So I'm not seeing any more questions. Should I record a little bit more? Should I call it a day? It really doesn't matter. I can tell you what I'm thinking here. I'm kind of tempted to, let's see. Kind of what I was thinking was, instead of this guitar, I kind of want to do something a little more sparse, where I play something like, let's see. right? And then I could throw some keyboard in there or something. So let's see. These are the same chords, I'm just playing them in different places. I'm going. So, keep that simple. Somehow it recorded on the wrong track. I see the problem. It sounded nice. Let's do that one more time. So I'm gonna go D minor. I'm gonna go. And then what I want to do is I'm going to add some keyboard, I think. Let's see. Let's do a little, I want to add some pads. And some pads, just a little, some keys that kind of just give some background ethereal interest. So maybe I'm going to go for, oop, wrong button. I'm going to go for, let's do a little, Mellotron is so interesting. Flutes. It's also kind of loud, so I'm gonna turn it down. Ooh, too low. So if I did something like, what do we have? D minor. That's cool. And then, it's kind of nice. Let's try that out. And I'll keep it quiet, and then maybe I'll put something kind of wiggly on it. Let's see. Nice. I'm just gonna do one lap there, and then I'm gonna try to make this a little more, try to make it a little more interesting with a little wiggly effect here, I think. Let's see. I'm gonna solo it for a sec. So I wanna mess with what do I want here? I think what I want is actually I'm gonna do another tape delay effect here. I'm gonna go over here, and oh, there's an amp effect too. So I think I want this to be an octave lower because it's kind of getting in the way of the guitar. There we go. Okay, and then I want to fix this a little bit. I want it to be a little cleaner. Let's see. That's nice. Let's see. Maybe I'll put... And then I'm gonna give this a little more juice to these drums. Wow, they've already got a lot of juice. That's kind of fun. I guess apparently this is the portion of the stream where I forget that I'm streaming and I just get lost making music. If anyone has any more questions for me, please fire them off and I'll get to them. But I'm also having a good time, so I'm just gonna Keep messing with this. Okay, TubeAmp2 says, what's your favorite scale? I've learned natural minor, and I just love it up against the major tonality with it as well. Yeah, natural minor and the major scale are fantastic. I personally love Dorian mode. That's my favorite. I love chord progressions in Dorian. I love the vibe of Dorian. It's great. Maybe I'll have to do a lesson about that sometime. I think I need to play some bass. The bass is calling my name. So let's get that. Let's get some bass going. Bass feels important. Garrett, yeah, I love bass. Bass is so nice. Let's see here. Let's see. Oh, excuse me for the pops. True S armor. Yeah, this is just the first chord progression. I'm just gonna make sure I'm in tune really quick. I'm pretty close. Yeah, there we go. So, I don't know what I'm gonna play. And it's probably not gonna sound awesome for a minute here, but what I'm gonna try to do is similar to what I do with melodies, where I try to come up with a phrase, also called like a vamp, where it's just like a rhythmic structure to interact with the chord. And usually, when I'm interacting with a chord, I'm trying to play, like here's a D minor. The next chord, the F, comes in a little early, but it's not gonna affect what we're doing here. So I try to mess with the root note on bass, and I try to mess with the 5th. I try to mess with the 7. Right? So I'm just trying to find a little vamp where I can mess with the root, the 5, and the 7, and then I might be able to do a similar thing with the other chords in the tune. But let's see here. I'm gonna throw some effects on here just so it sounds a little better. I'm actually gonna roll a little low end off the bass, believe it or not. I'm gonna hit this with a nice compressor. I'm gonna do a nice slowish attack, and then let's try this. This is just to even it out a little. And then I'm gonna hit it with the FET mode here. That's, I think, gonna be nice. Make sure I'm not. Cool. I'm okay with a little distortion. Sorry, I love playing bass so much. I don't know why I'm sorry about that. I hope you're not sorry that I love playing bass too much. Okay, so I'm gonna mess around for a minute till I find something I like. Here we go. Where's the right button? There we go. I don't know. Let's see. There's something there I like. So, we got a good question. Does the bass translate to guitar, or is it complementary? It's basically the thickest 4 strings on the guitar A bass is basically, not basically, it's exactly those strings an octave lower. So you don't really play chords that often on the bass, but you know, I could play like a G chord or an E major chord, but chords on the bass are a whole other thing. So all I'm trying to do is complement roots, fifths, sevens of my minor chords, root 5 and 6 of my major chords, generally speaking, and then we'll see what happens from there. But I got something I kind of liked in there. I like that. Dum bum ba dum bum 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 boom da da. I'm gonna try that. I don't know. So I have kind of a nice simple bass line that I like that was but I could also do something a little more like but I don't know. I like the other one that I did actually. So I'm gonna stick with that one. And now I've got something to work with, you know? And it's this is kind of the funny thing about writing. And it just does something, you know. It doesn't have to be amazing. It doesn't have to be awesome. Root 5 and 6 of major and root 5 and 7 of minor is generally true. I mean, generally a good approach to start with. It is getting hot in here. It's a warm day and I don't have any AC, so I'm slowly cooking in here, which means I think it's time for me to call it a day. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. If anyone has any last minute questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm out of here. Fun stream. I'll do another one in a bit. And, you know, thanks for hanging out with me for about an hour. And I hope you learned something. I hope you found this was useful. And if you like this kind of thing, you know, come check out my online school, patreon.com/Scott Paul Johnson. And yeah, I try to really encourage my students, especially my intermediate students, to sort of branch out and learn how to write music, maybe learn music theory, and then learn how to actually use it to have some fun and be creative and you know, create that intrinsic motivation I was talking about at the beginning of the stream. And you know, hopefully that gives you some fun stuff to work with. Anyhow, thanks for all the kind words in the chat. I'll see you all next time. Peace out. Goodbye.